We gave you like 8 other things to do, so.
And I'm looking through the Bill and Angela. We're still waiting on, okay, I see Beth. How many do we need for quorum again? Is 5?
6.
6?
Nope, you're right. Hold on a second. I think you're right.
Got 1, 2, see Tom. I think we've got 5. Should we go ahead and call the meeting to order and do roll call to see who's here?
Yep.
All right. I'll just run through our committee members. Angela?
Here.
Beth?
Here.
Bill?
Here.
Bridget?
She's coming in.
Okay, great. There's Bridget. Ellen? Okay. Kristen? Don't see Kristen yet. Michael?
Michael's coming in now.
Okay, and Tom?
Here.
Great.
I
Okay.
was in a meeting with Kristen earlier. She's planning to be here.
Okay. Great. Well, I think we've got a quorum, so we could go ahead and get started. So thanks to everyone who's here today. Just want to start off real quick by just saying how thankful I am for the work of this committee and for the work the city's doing to update the climate plan, and for all the community members supporting us throughout this process. So, going through our agenda for today, we're going to start off by approving the September minutes, which I think everybody has, should have just gotten an email about if not seen them before.
So moved.
Okay.
I move to approve.
Do we have a second?
This is Michael Kelly. I'll second.
All right. All in favor of approving the minutes? Say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. Oh, sorry. Okay, I think the ayes have it. Minutes are approved. Then we wanted to give any member of the public the opportunity here at the beginning of the meeting to speak, knowing that we just have about 90 minutes and a pretty full agenda. But if there's anyone who's on the call who would like to say something, we invite you to do so now. Just ask that you try to keep it to about a minute or so. And you can do that by raising your hand, right, Rachel?
Yes.
Is that how we can do it?
True.
If they can raise their hand. We're also going to be monitoring the chat throughout the meeting, and before we take a vote on anything later on, we'll ask if there's any input from the public too. So, any hands raised?
It looks like Brad has his hand raised.
Okay, can we let him speak?
Go ahead, Brad. You're on mute.
Brad, we can't hear you if you're talking. Let's see if we can. Okay. Brad, do you know how to unmute yourself? Click on the three little dots next to your name. Oops, sorry for my cat. Okay, Brad, I'm gonna need to move on. So if you figure out how to, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if Brad's still having issues, he's welcome to drop something in the comments, and then
Right.
yeah, we can just address that as needed if time allows.
Thank you for that. Yes. Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Well, hearing none, we can move on to the next agenda item. So today we have on the agenda to select a vice chair for the committee. And so my thoughts on the vice chair, and we can discuss this more if needed, is that the vice chair would, fill in if the chair's not available, and help with subcommittee work, and potentially attend meetings with OEQ with the chair when they're available. So, and the rest can kind of be figured out as needed. But any other thoughts, or should we open it up to nominations for vice chair? I guess I'll go ahead and open it up to nominations unless there's other thoughts on that. Oh, Bill.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I'd like to nominate Michael for the role of vice chair.
Thanks, Bill. Are there any other nominations? All right. Hearing none, do we need to take a vote then?
Yeah, Robin, it's
If-
kind of whatever rules set out your committee. I mean, if you follow what you did before, it's a vote verbally. Also, is Michael interested in the role? I guess is the question that you might ask as well.
Well, yes, that's a good question. Michael, would you, do you accept the nomination?
Yes, I do accept the nomination, and thank you to Bill for nominating me.
Great.
Yeah, so if there aren't any other candidates or nominations, then I guess to make it formal, I would just kind of do a roll call and go from there.
Okay. I guess we'll do vote by roll call then. So just yay if you vote for Michael. Angela?
Yay.
Beth?
Yay.
Bill?
Yay.
Bridget?
Yay.
Did Ellen join? Any chance? I don't see her on there. Okay. Kristen?
Yay.
Michael?
Yay.
And Tom? Did you vote, Tom? Or I think you might have been on mute.
Yes. Yay.
Oh.
Sorry about that.
All right, that's all right. Okay. Yeas have it. Congratulations, Michael, on being selected as our vice chair. Yes. All right, next on our agenda, I've got legislative priorities. And I just wanted to throw it out there to suggest that perhaps our committee come up with some legislative priorities, not within this meeting because we already have such a full agenda, but I guess my thought was that we could form a subcommittee to work on this before the next meeting and come forward with some proposed legislative priorities to recommend to the city for this coming legislative session. So I just wanted to open that up for discussion to see if that's something that the committee would like to do this year.
I have a question. Would that include the regulatory agencies as well, or is this strictly the State House?
I think it could include the regulatory agencies.
Robin, I'm sorry.
Oh.
Would you mind repeating the question?
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is I guess I'm making a motion that we as a committee put together some legislative priorities before the next committee meeting. So I guess would there be a second to that? And these would be our recommendations to the city council and the mayor on potential issues that we'd like to see included in the legislative priorities for the city. Does
Sure.
that make sense?
Yes, and so yes, this is Michael Kelly, and I will second the motion.
Is there any discussion?
Can you tell me more about, can you give us some specifics about what you're thinking about? Like building codes or what, I mean?
One thing that I think would be important to include would be legislation which specifically supports multimodal transportation needs. So I think it's okay to be somewhat not vague, but kind of abstract, understanding that, in terms of what the specifics are, it's going to take a little bit more to like get that worked out in terms of specifics in Jefferson City or in Washington, D.C.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know, for instance, we had the electrification preemption in Jefferson City this past year, and I know that having the city council have legislative priorities that could be helpful for the city, and so we don't, we have local control and stuff like that when it comes to building codes. So I like this idea. I think it's great.
Any more discussion?
I guess my 2 cents would be, and I'm not as familiar with what is, on the docket at the Public Service Commission, but I would think that we would want to intervene if we have the resources in any sort of rate cases at the Missouri Public Service Commission, particularly since the energy burden is so high in Kansas City and continues to be.
Bill?
Robin, to be clear, do you have a deadline on when we would, assuming that the committee wants to do this, which it seems like they do, when you would want any of our ideas back?
Well, I guess one option would be we could have a subcommittee meeting, or between now and then for a few people to come together and discuss it, but also take ideas from everyone who has ideas. I would guess before that subcommittee was to take place.
Yeah, I mean, PSC as an example could be any time, but legislatively, bills tend to be written in December and dropped in January. So I would say anything we're thinking legislatively should come to the forefront by next month, if it's legislative. Now, if it's PSC or something else within the government of Missouri, that could be as needed. But legislative, it really needs to be next month, or kind of forget it.
Yeah, well, that's why I guess in my motion I said that the committee would come with recommendations for us to vote on at the next meeting.
Okay.
And then put forward, right away.
All right. Okay, so especially legislative by next month. Gotcha. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other discussion?
This is Kristen, and I just need to be, I would like to delve further into this. I'm fully supportive, but I'd like to know more about, okay, so we're talking about state level legislation, right? We're talking about advocating for state level legislation, and which would require, I'm a little, this is not, advocacy is not, at Bridging the Gap, we're way more focused on actual programs and boots on the ground work. So I guess I'm asking, I think what your intention is to have this committee be much more active on the front of pushing state legislation than it ever has been, because we haven't done that at all. And so would we need to be leading up to, would we need to be lobbying, for example, in order to have a hope of getting some of this legislation passed? Is that your vision, Robin?
I guess part of my vision is that the city comes out with their legislative priorities every year, is my understanding.
Yes.
And I haven't seen anything in there recently, and I've only been around a couple of years, so don't read too much into that. But I haven't seen a lot in the last couple of years pertaining to the climate goals of the city.
Right.
So
right.
I guess we'd like to see some of these goals that our committee is working towards and the city's climate planning process is working towards included in the list. And then if there's specific legislation, I'm not exactly sure how that would work yet. I guess that's partly to be discussed by the committee, but
and we have a subcommittee that's working on this content, right?
Well, that's one of the things we're deciding right now.
Okay.
We don't have a subcommittee
Thank
yet.
you.
No.
Thank you.
Yeah. And just for additional context, the city does put together its legislative priorities. Usually it's in the fall. It's not just state, they do a state and a federal list. And last year, we as the departments did not have the opportunity to put in what we thought were the legislative priorities. The year before that we did, and that was the last time we had in there a legislative priority that was related to the climate protection planning process. So I have not seen, I put out a request for what that timetable is for this year. What, if any, input are they looking to get from city departments, and have not been provided any guidance on that yet. So right now it's all hands on deck about the budget right now. So, but anyhow, this move would be at least a good idea to get your legislative priorities ready to go as a recommendation to council and the mayor. So that's ready to go when they ask for it.
Andy, when you submitted on behalf of the department priorities a couple years ago, were they pretty detailed, or was it more or less just sort of generally related to the climate plan?
Yeah, they were general. Mm-hmm. Yep. And oftentimes they are usually the legislative priorities are fairly general. I think we had in there one year one on the PACE program. So some amendments or changes to the PACE program to to kind of look more at consumer protections and things of that nature. And then the climate protection planning process, that kind of thing. So, they're not real detailed, very, a sentence or two usually is what I've seen.
Yeah, that's helpful for us to know what they, I guess what level of detail they want and what would be too much or overwhelming them. And we don't want anything to get rejected at the door for being, I guess, too much or too little.
Right. Right. And I can continue. I'll still try to get more guidance from the mayor's office, because usually it's the mayor's office that kind of directs that particular activity for the city, and he usually coordinates with the city manager on that. So it's just a matter of how do we get input into that as departments and or the commissions.
Is there any more discussion on this, or should we, if not, go ahead and vote on, I guess, forming a subcommittee to put together ideas for legislative priorities to bring back to the full committee next month? So all in favor of that? I guess, are we doing roll call votes for each vote, or can we do ayes and
You could
nays,
do
Andy?
ayes and nays.
Do
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. So all in favor of that, please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say nay. All right, ayes have it. Michael, I guess you and I can work on the logistics of putting the subcommittee together and get back to everybody. Great. Next on our agenda is an update on the Kansas City, Missouri 100% clean energy goal. Andy,
Yeah, I'll take this one.
I'll hand that over to you.
All right. So I'm just going to give a little brief background just to get everybody on the same page on this. So back in 2018, we had a resolution that passed for Kansas City to move forward with carbon-free electricity. And at that time, the due date per the resolution was December of 2020. And so at that time, we moved forward with working on an agreement with Evergy at the time to provide energy through their Renewable Direct program to help us get to meet that goal. So we went through negotiations, and of course, Evergy was in the process of negotiating their contracts with their developers for the various resources. 2019, it was when we did sign 2 contracts. The way it is here locally, we have 2 territories, the Missouri West Territory and the Missouri Metro Territory. That's how Evergy kind of splits up the energy, the electricity in Kansas City. So we'd have 2 contracts, and that also meant you have to have 2 different resources that would provide that renewable energy. So we signed those agreements in 2019. One of those was to service the Missouri West Territory, which is pretty much, if you can think of the Northland, pretty much from Berry Road north to the airport. So that captures several fire stations and a wastewater treatment plant and KCI and whatever. And then the Missouri Metro Territory is pretty much everything else. The Missouri West Territory was to be serviced by a resource known as Cimarron Bend 3, which was designed to go online in December of 2020, which it did. So as of right now, we are 100% renewable for the Missouri West Territory, and that resource has been running well for us. It's been treating us very well. We actually, based on a report that we got from January to January to June of this year, the city basically made money on the wind resource. It's a wind farm. It's 18 megawatts in capacity, and basically we earned somewhere in the order of about $800,000 in credits towards our electricity bills in that particular territory. So doing pretty well. If you look at that, that covers about 19.5% of our electricity usage. So if you want to look at 100%, we're at 19.5% renewable. When you factor in citywide, all of the city's usage, we're basically at around 60% carbon free. When you consider the existing fuel blend from Evergy for all of our other facilities, and then you factor in the 19.5% that's renewable for the Missouri West Territory, we're right around about 60%. Now, that's just one of the wind farms. The second second agreement that we signed was for another farm known as Expedition. That one was supposed to also kind of go into effect at the end of this year. Unfortunately, that particular farm fell through. So the contracts between Evergy and the developer of that particular farm it didn't. I didn't get. They wouldn't share specifics, but at the end of the day, that particular power purchase agreement is not going to move forward. So we are kind of in a holding pattern on that particular one, which for us, that represented about 57 megawatts is what we were looking to get out of that particular farm. So it's the bulk of what we need to get pretty close to 100%. Now, so that's one of the things we need to kind of have Evergy kind of finish wrapping that up. I've had various conversations with them. Of course, they're in high-level discussions with developers to find another resource. And so they're only willing to share so much with me on where those talks are going, but they know how important this is for us to meet our goals. So they said I would be, the first in the know when they have something in writing and more concrete to share. So the second resource is off the table at the moment. So right now we are operating under just one power purchase agreement, and it's doing well. So no complaints there. And actually, we did apply to EPA's Green Power Program and reported our activities under the Cimarron Bend 3 wind farm, and EPA came back after they did their evaluation of the amount of energy that we're getting through that power purchase agreement, ranked Kansas City as number 15 out of the top 30 cities in the country on access to renewable energy. So kind of a big deal that came out about 2 months ago. Unfortunately, the city did not put out a press release about it, which I was a little disheartened about, but we did draft one and it was ready to go, but it never got released. So anyhow, that's kind of a bit of good news that I kind of shared with various folks along the way. So that's more or less where we are with that. I would say that the city manager is very much interested in this area. Another strategy for us is, of course, solar up at KCI. So we're looking at doing a feasibility study up at KCI to kind of see how we can use approximately 2,000 acres of basically vacant land to basically put a solar array up there that can help us with our renewable goals. So there'll be something there maybe in the future. So a couple hurdles for us, a second power purchase agreement that would help us get there, a solar array. We do have one other hurdle, and that's the street lights. Power purchase agreements under the green tariffs that were passed for those do not cover non-metered accounts. And unfortunately, most of Kansas City's streetlights are not metered. And so being that they're not metered, they're not covered under that tariff, and therefore are not eligible for the Renewable Direct program. So we knew that was going to be a problem. So, if we had both power purchase agreements in effect at this point, we would still be short about 12% from being 100% carbon free on electricity. So still have that hurdle. I've been talking to folks with Evergy and with the city as how we can overcome that particular obstacle as well. So as you can see, we've got a few things to work through, but we're still working through those issues. So that's kind of a quick 5-6 minute summary of that topic. Any questions?
I think Bill had
Bill?
a question.
Okay.
More of an observation. Came through my email this morning that Evergy has put out a request for proposal for a minimum 50 megawatts of new wind. Don't know if that might be connected with what the city could get later, but I just wanted to let the committee know that.
Yeah, and they're also not just for renewable direct, but they're also looking for a resource for the community as well, community solar particularly. So that's just some things that I know that they're looking for. They thought originally we were supposed to do some of that community solar up at the airport, which that project had fallen apart. This new effort under the new city manager may include some community solar, but Evergy may be looking for a totally different resource for that as well.
Andy, there's a question in the chat from Brad Looked.
Okay. Okay, so how long of a holding pattern? Well, I can't say. These discussions between Evergy and their prospective developers, I mean, they've been ongoing for the past year, at least since the Expedition project fell apart. So, I would say from what they're sharing with me, things are getting close to some type of an agreement. Assuming, let's say, that they were to sign off on their agreement, then usually from what I've seen, construction goes. Now, it depends. If they are able to find a resource that's already under construction or already constructed that has capacity, it could happen pretty quick. For example, if they have to construct the wind farm, like it was for Cimarron Bend 3, that took about a year for them to construct about, the 18 megawatts that, or it's bigger than that, but, it took about a year for them to construct the third phase of that wind farm. So, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's several years by any means. I'm hoping, 6 months to a year and a half to 2 years at the most. If the city goes with the solar array up the airport, I can't say what the speed of that would be, when you finish all the environmental studies and things that we need to do to make that happen. So just don't have enough information quite yet for really a concrete timeline.
All right. Any other questions? Thanks, Andy, for that update.
Okay.
I think next up we've got the Brindle group here with an update and an engagement session. So I'll turn it over to them.
Great. Thanks, Robin. I'm going to go ahead and share screen. We got a short presentation for you today. So hopefully
Becca,
everyone can see that.
Becca, do you want to introduce yourselves?
Yes, we can absolutely do introductions. I think I met a lot of you when I was here, let's see, month and a half ago, but my name is Becca Stock. I am your project manager for this climate protection and resiliency plan. With me today, I have Judy Dorsey, who's our executive project manager at the Brindle Group, and then Stephanie Smith, who is our equity consultant on this team. So I think you guys have met Stephanie before. Judy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I actually was at the original CPSC meeting, but I've not met some of the newest members. So it's a pleasure to be here today. I'm Judy Dorsey. I'm the founding president and principal engineer at Brindle Group. I've had the pleasure of working with you all in Kansas City on your climate and greenhouse gas accounting through the years, and we're happy to be working with you on the CPRP. And as Becca said, I'm your executive project manager. I'm also leading up the climate vulnerability assessment and the kind of financial analysis side of things for the plan.
Stephanie, do you want to say hi quickly?
Hello, all. Good to be with you all again. Stephanie Smith, co-founder and managing partner of Sulfic Solutions, and we're based here in Kansas City, Missouri.
Thank you. All righty. So just a quick agenda of what we'd like to do with you guys today. We're just going to give you a brief overview of kind of what we've been up to since the last time we talked. And then we really want to spend the bulk of the day getting your guys' feedback on some key kind of framework ideas for the plan to really make sure that we've got the structure down before we move any further forward in the planning process. So that's going to be the bulk of today. Before we get started, I just want to center us with our equity commitment, acknowledging that climate change does not impact everyone equally, and communities of color, as well as low-income individuals, young children, elderly, outdoor workers, immigrants, and refugees are most likely to be severely impacted. With that in mind, we're using these 8 guiding principles throughout all of our planning efforts to make sure that we're keeping equity at the forefront. So I wanted to just share with you a couple that have been resonating with me as I've been doing this work. If you guys want to put in chat any that really kind of stick out to you or resonate with you at this moment, please feel free to do so. I think one of the ones that kind of jumps out at me, especially from a consultant perspective, is work with and not for. And I think that's, always very important in that we can bring some of the national expertise, but we need to make sure that we're really elevating the voices of the city and that this is your plan at the end of the day, and you guys really own the plan. So with that in mind, getting proximate to the problem, we've got our boots on the ground resources there that have been doing some great work on the outreach front, which I'll share in a minute. And that's just been really encouraging for me to see kind of the fruits of their efforts coming through in the comments that we're getting and the engagement that we're getting, which is really exciting. So with that in mind, I wanted to just do a quick project update. You saw this last time we were here. This is our kind of 4-phased approach to this project, with phase 1 being listen and learn. We wrapped that up in August, and that was really just kind of getting to know your communities, understanding how climate change is already impacting people in your community, kind of what their priorities are and what their concerns are. And that's when we did our first presentation to you all, just to kind of orient you to the project and have you guys know what to expect and what to kind of know what's going to come up in the next couple months. We are currently in phase 2, which is really this collaborate and explore phase, which is understanding what sorts of strategies your community might be interested in doing. So we've been doing a lot of culling from all the work you guys have already done with the regional plan, with the playbook, with your previous climate action plan, as well as some other strategies that have come through, both through the online engagement and on our boots in the ground engagement. So we've got a huge list of strategies right now, and we're really going to take the next month or two to make sure that it's a complete list from our community members, and then start to put a framework around that. So that's really what we're going to be talking about today, is how do we make sense of this huge list of strategies that we've been collecting. Phase 3 is really going to be, okay, great. We've got these strategies. We understand what the community's really priorities are. How are we going to get it done? What is our first things that need to happen? Where are our resources? Really make sure that this gets put into action and doesn't just sit on a shelf. And then phase 4 is, again, just kind of mobilizing the plan, making sure the community feels ownership of the plan, is excited for implementation. And we'll see you guys again in phase 4, in which we'll show you kind of an early draft of the plan, and you guys can provide feedback with, how we have it structured, the resources we have identified, all sorts of things like that. So we'll plan on seeing you guys again in January for that meeting. As I mentioned, we have been busy in phase 1. This is just a snapshot of the engagement we've had to date. So tons of engagement online, both from people that have found it organically, and also from people who have been kind of funneled there through our boots on the ground efforts. So we've got more than 50 strategies already coming out of that, as well as 50 different people telling us how climate change is affecting them right now. Almost 1,000 people have visited the page, which is great. And then over 100 people have kind of put different pins on the map to tell us where they think things could be, there are opportunities, or whether there's a problem that could be addressed through climate action. In addition, we've had almost 80 conversations on the ground with over 500 stakeholders This has been really focused in some of the hardest hit communities based on our vulnerability assessment, mostly council districts 3, 4, 5, and 6, but we have been touching all of them. And this has been in person and online through our climate justice workers. So with that in mind, I'm going to turn this over to Judy, and she's going to just kind of lead us in a discussion about how we're going to take all this input and make it into a functional plan.
Great, thank you, Becca. So given all the feedback that Becca just described in terms of engagement, our project team met with city staff and our consultant team to have an internal workshop to start to organize this into a coherent plan framework. And then we would like to share with you our proposed structure and topics. And once we confirm that with you, then we have a series of other meetings coming up next week, online workshops the following week, in-person workshops, and then in December with these topic area conversations. So we're kind of, the rubber's hitting the road where we need to start, solidifying the structure. And so given that, the next slide, based on everything we heard, there are 3 objectives that we're aiming for. One, we've heard from stakeholder feedback that we need to make this very accessible. And the way we're planning to do that is reducing jargon and making the body of the plan really short and visually engaging, and a lot of the details as appendices. The feedback is this needs to be technically credible. So we have a meeting later this month where Becca and I and city team is working on the methodology to calculate the greenhouse gas emissions reduction and making sure that we will be achieving these quantitative targets based on the strategies, and also doing some analysis to help inform prioritization and decision making. And the third thing that we've really heard is that we need to be spurring urgent action. And we've heard this from different ways and means. And most recently, even the Environmental Management Committee, for example, shared with us their annual reports. And that was one of their key findings around messaging as well. And to do that, we're going to be elevating local relevant stories, elevating what's already being done. So there's a sense of momentum and honoring the history of action so far, and by providing financing and other resources to spur that urgent action. So what we're looking at in terms of the next slide, please, Becca, is really starting at the top with the plan vision, and then we're organizing and by what we're calling climate action areas. And you'll see in this next slide how this all comes together visually, where we're currently proposing 6 climate action areas, and that's what we'd like to get your feedback on today. And then each of those climate action areas would have 1 or more goals. And we're showing just an example here with mobility. One goal could be increase electric vehicle adoption. And then each of those goals has 1 or more strategies, such as install charging stations, and each of those strategies then would have action steps. And the strategy is what we're calling the climate solutions. And that's what we've been hearing from stakeholders, as Becca said, over 50 strategies from stakeholders. But as we'll show in this next slide, our other sources of strategies have been the regional climate action plan, these community conversations, and also what is needed to reach that mitigation impact in terms of carbon neutrality and 100% renewable electricity. So one thing that we'd like to do, and we're going to get your feedback here shortly, is what we're proposing. And now you could, I'm sure you guys have had this experience too in past, even the regional climate action plan, as to the extent we can, we're really trying to align around what's already happening, and hence these 6 climate action areas. But we have 3 cross-cutting themes around resilience, financing and innovation, and community empowerment. But really the center of all this is around climate justice and equity. So this is what we meant by building this plan inside out, where we're hearing first from the community in various ways and different forms, and then assembling and developing the plan in a way that does still align with work that has been done in the past. So to this next slide, the concept of accessibility, each one of these climate action areas will have just a very brief description so that people can understand what we mean by mobility, energy supply, etc. And we, for basically, have 2 points of engagement in our short time today. One is, if you could, at this point, share with us how you're feeling about these 6. Is there anything missing? And what about our draft statements underneath them? Do we need to adjust any wording to ensure community members understand where their feedback or concerns are being addressed? You can also post any questions you might have for us, like, where does something go? There, as you can imagine, there was a lot of lumping and splitting. And while we've had 50, and feel free to go ahead and add comments into the chat box at this time, please. There are 50 strategies that were kind of originated from the community, but really we have about nearly 200 strategies across these action areas that we're in the process of compiling and organizing for these upcoming workshops. So you can see why we're eager to really settle in on the big buckets of our climate action areas so that we can kind of move forward with getting feedback on strategies, or also known as our climate solutions. I am not seeing much feedback yet. Is there?
There it comes.
Oh yeah, here we go.
Green jobs.
Yes. Where would green jobs go? And that would likely be in part of our cross-cutting theme around financing and kind of green and just economy. Maybe we can even expand from financing to green and just economy. But we'll take all of your feedback today, and we'll figure out how to integrate and resolve your feedback into sort of that next iteration of these climate action areas that will then go to the public next week. So great idea on green jobs. Is there a way to broadly show % of greenhouse gas emissions? We will likely well, yes, that will be part of our analysis. That will be coming later. But what we sometimes do is kind of put these different action areas on a spectrum of their relative contribution to mitigation versus adaptation and resiliency. So that's something that we can also work with for presenting and describing these action areas and strategies for our upcoming workshops. So great request, comment about that. Different levels of importance. We will get to prioritization in phase 3. Outdoor pollutants and emissions. Are we talking from transportation mobility there? I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but in the next slide, actually, let's kind of go to that slide, Becca. This is still the open question. What are we missing any topics? But I did want to share in the next slide while we're getting this is as our team workshopped this out and did the work of the first draft of these 6 action areas, a lot of topics came up that are kind of key concepts. So, green jobs, outdoor pollutants, etc. These key concepts would be showing up in the plan in the relevant part that they affect. And so that might be that they show up in relevant strategy descriptions and co-benefits. They might be call-out boxes with key facts and terminology. We'll absolutely have a glossary. They might show up in introductory discussion on the importance of that climate action area. So while we're at it, keep these comments coming. We're taking notes, gathering your feedback, and whether it's an actual change to a climate action area that you would like to see, or just making sure that we're capturing key concepts. That's the feedback that we're looking for. And so outdoor pollutants, emphasize the prominent mobility element should focus on multimodal forms. Absolutely. Not simply a shift to electric vehicles. Exactly. So that's a key concept, for example, that would show up in our introduction to the section on mobility. Homes and buildings, add efficient, resilient, healthy to the language. Excellent in terms of that subtitle. Outdoor air quality in general, absolutely, likely under mobility or any other areas where it's relevant. Homes and buildings creating affordable living spaces, being able to get into the space and also being able to stay in the space. I think that is where we'll really, when we start with equity at the center, you'll see a lot of those concepts around, displacement or gentrification or other things like that would really be highlighted in terms of key facts, figures, et cetera, when we really start with that as the beginning. We are in great preview to the listening sessions, the energy, awesome, thank you. Accessibility, especially for disabled residents, thank you. We will add that to the key concepts. In addition to maintaining biodiversity and nature, biodiversity and people-centered focus on impacted communities here. So looking at the clock, I want to be and a second vote for that. Looking at the clock, I want to be respectful of your time today. And so there's one other thing that we'd like to get your feedback on. Certainly, if there's anything else that we missed in this short time, feel free to let us know that through email or other form. But we are at this point honing in on getting these materials ready for our workshops next week. So then in the next slide, Becca, if you would, we're really now making sure that all of this engagement and the structure of the framework is marching towards the plan itself. And to that end, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, and really want to get your input on these 3 questions. And the first question, and I'm going to kind of turn this over to Becca. And I just did want to acknowledge the comment too about accountability. And we have done that in other communities where there's sort of key stakeholders that you're really relying on them meeting their goals and making sure that those are action steps around accountability at the strategy level. So you're right on track there with the comment about accountability. So I'm going to shift this then to Becca, and we are going to switch to a Jamboard and ask you 3 questions in our remaining time. I think we've
10
got
minutes.
10 minutes. Yep. And so with that, you already get a preview to the question. So Becca, do you want to take it from here, and I'll help you on the notes side.
Absolutely. So I put a link in chat to the Jamboard. I'll share my screen, but you're going to want to click on that link and navigate to Jamboard yourself so you can add your ideas via sticky notes. If you're having trouble with Jamboard or you can't access it or you just feel more comfortable with chat, feel free to drop your ideas in chat too, and Judy will take notes for them as well. But what we want to do here is just hear from you kind of what you're hoping, big picture for this plan, kind of what you want this plan to communicate, who we're talking to, and what you want the feel to be to make sure that we're matching expectations. So the first question here is, what are the most important points for this plan to communicate? If you were going to do the 1-sentence elevator pitch of the plan, what would that be? So to put your ideas down, you're going to want to come over here on the left-hand side, click this square here that says sticky note, and type your idea in, hit save, and then you can move your sticky note around, or I'll move them around as we can kind of cluster. So if you want to pick 3 or so phrases that you think really kind of capture what you want the plan to communicate. Awesome. Getting some great examples in here. Seeing some key themes come through, a lot of them about, actually promising action, making sure that this is really going to have impact and people feel confident that things are going to happen. Lots about kind of protecting the environment, clean air, clean water, healthy living area, and lots of kind of moving forward together, whether that's regionally or with the city and the community, that sort of thing. So this is great. Just save this. Feel free to continue adding ideas as they come up. I know some people have ideas that come to them really quickly and some people want to mull it over a little bit more. So I'll leave this board up for the rest of the week. If you want to come back and add ideas, I'll download it again. But acknowledging that we're kind of short on time, I want to go ahead and move on to the next one. So at the top of your screen, if you want to go to the next frame, you should see a screen that says, what should the tone of the plan be? So this is just, add one adjective or maybe a couple of words on a sticky note that says how you want readers to feel when they're reading this plan. And I think I was going to say, I think I heard urgent a lot in our elevator pitches. So I think that's a good example. Urgent and empowering. So I'm seeing quite a few folks saying we want it to be kind of jargon-free, inclusive, kind of making sure everyone feels like they're involved there. I feel like direct and unapologetic kind of go together, but if someone had something else on the unapologetic one, let me know if you meant something else. But when I see that, I think of kind of being forward with the facts and making sure that we are clear on what needs to happen. Kind of the recognizing the emergency down there. Urgent and empowering, I like that. Recognize Indigenous people, like that. All right. I'm seeing a lot of kind of common themes across here. So it's nice to see that at least the folks that are putting their ideas down are kind of all on the same page about how we want this plan to feel, very, this is urgent, we got to do something now, but we know what we need to do and we can do it, is sort of the takeaways I'm getting from these sticky notes. So love it. All righty, last one. And again, feel free to keep adding if you have more ideas. But we want to know what the audience is for this plan. So not that it won't be read by everyone in your community ideally, but who's the main person we're writing this to? And maybe who's the secondary audience? So let's say, for example, the example I've got up there is, let's say the primary audience is community leaders that are working in this space. Like, hey, this is what we got to do together and we're going to get it done. And maybe secondary audience is city council, because they're going to need their support too. Or it could be, citizens at large, could be, elected officials, whoever you think we should be writing this plan to. this one in the middle. See a couple sticky notes here on kind of trying to write to those that are not the choir, who may not have previously engaged. This is an interesting one, written for children's children, like that. I see businesses and kind of the large emitter types coming up quite a bit. I like this comment here that decision makers are people too and also don't like jargon. That's I think that's a very excellent comment. Okay, lots of general public, kind of a community general public plan. All right. So my general takeaway from this is that we want it to be accessible to kind of the public at large to read it, but also want to make sure that it's kind of being specific. I'm seeing a lot of kind of like who we think might need to take significant action should see themselves in this plan. Whether that's legislators or businesses or, you know, the businesses, Evergy. All right. Okay, so we've only got a couple minutes left. I'm going to go ahead and save this one more time. Like I said, feel free to continue thinking about it. I will come back and download this one more time at the end of the week. So if you guys want to add additional thoughts or comments to it while, you know, things come up in the middle of the night or whatever, feel free to continue to do so. Really appreciate your feedback, and this will really help us kind of frame out the tone and the feeling of the plan. And it matches really closely what we heard from a lot of the city staff too. So I feel like there's good alignment here with kind of what we're hoping for out of this plan. And so in our last couple minutes here, I just wanted to kind of give you all a heads up on what's coming. So we're talking about this phase 2, kind of reviewing all of those strategies we've heard so far, adding any additional ones in, and starting to hear from various regions what's important to us, which one of these really resonate, or we already working on, or we really want that to happen. So we've got 3 online workshops in 2 weeks. If I know what day it is, yeah, 2 weeks that we'll be doing online. They are targeted to specific regions, but folks are more than welcome to join any of them if they're more available. Registrations are available on the Playbook website. I put it there, so feel free to share that with your networks, encourage folks to attend. If people would rather do an in-person workshop, we have 3 of those the following week or week and a half, which are listed below. Those details were just finalized this morning, so you'll see information about locations and how to get signed up for those coming soon. So that'll be kind of our general community. This is what we want to hear in our region. And then in December, we'll be getting topical groups together based on those 6 action areas we saw today, and really looking at the priorities from the communities and thinking about how do we get this done? You know, what are those big priorities that are going to get us the emissions we need that the community supports, and who's working in that space? Where's the financing? How we're going to make this work? So those are coming soon. I imagine that some or many of you will be interested and or asked to participate in those. So we'll be in touch with how those groups are going to be organized and kind of help you guys get involved there as well. Any last minute questions before we're done today? All right. Stephanie or Judy or Jerry, Laura, or I guess Andy, any final thoughts that I missed?
I just wanted to acknowledge a comment in the chat box about about funding the plan. And so what we haven't shown you yet is the outline for the plan. We're showing you the structure of the action areas, but there is a section that does address sort of the implementation side, including funding. So wanted to acknowledge that comment, but otherwise it's been really helpful feedback and appreciate your input and leadership and support to this effort.
Absolutely. Thank you all.
Thank you so much for that update and for being so timely with not very much time on the agenda. But all right. With that, I'd love to get into our last agenda item for today. And I want to thank Jeremy Knoll and Billy Davies for being here today to talk about IECC building code. And Andy, was there anybody was Greg or anyone also going to join us today?
Greg's here with us, yes.
Okay, so how do you, maybe I should turn it over to you. How about who should go first, or what were you kind of envisioning?
Well, I mean, you can do, let's do, I mean, Billy and Jeremy, if they're ready, just kind of give an overview, and then Greg, unless Greg, if you didn't mention if you have a conflict for later, if you want to go first and just talk about the process. That's kind of where we were coming from on the city side is the upcoming process.
No, Andy, what you said sounded good. Hello, everyone. Go ahead with the overview, and then I can add comments.
Okay, there you go.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Quick, I guess just a mic check. Can you all hear me okay? Fantastic. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, congratulations, Mr. Kelly, and members of the committee. Good afternoon. My name is Billy Davies. I am a resident of the 6th District here in KCMO. I also serve as a program coordinator for the Sierra Club Missouri chapter based in Kansas City. And I have the privilege of being joined by Jeremy Knoll, who in addition to being an architect at BNIM Architects here in KC, is a leader with Climate Action KC, serves on their board, member of the American Institute of Architects, the U.S. Green Building Council, and a number of other great civic organizations, but here based in Kansas City. And it's our pleasure to be here to talk about this important initiative. As you all will recall, after the City Council moved forward, passing its unique and incredible legislation that has kicked off this process that is bringing us here today, the first action that it took pursuant to those goals was adopting the resolution 200,449, encouraging the city to slow things down to consider strong building codes. And a lot of that movement has been thanks to civic leaders such as the folks on this committee, our other advisory boards, and we're thrilled that these conversations are continuing to happen, and thank our great city staff, all of whom are present, OEQ, City Planning and Development, Mr. Franzine, all working to continue this effort to help ensure that we're meeting our goals, while also working with the public to champion policies that will make our communities and economy healthier, more resilient, so that all can thrive. And so I will stop talking now to pass the mic to Jeremy so that he can share insight on the 2021 IECC, what a strong ordinance for Kansas City could look like that will help us meet our goals and continue to make our community more resilient and sustainable. So Jeremy, please go ahead.
Hi, everybody. So like Billy said, I'm Jeremy Knoll with BNIM Architects, and I wear a lot of other hats, but among those hats is working with this group of folks you see on the screen here over the last year and a half or so, and trying to advocate and push forward with the next version of the energy code. So to kind of put a quick graphic to where we are in terms of code adoption in Kansas City, the IBC 2012 with all of its articles 1 through 14 was adopted in June 2012. And then last year, all except for Article 14 were adopted under the IBC 2018. I have noted using a kind of a yellow highlighted asterisk there, sections of the code that have some weakening amendments. And so looking forward then, as part of the work that we've done, working with the city council and Greg and Andy and others, is to look at how do we take the energy piece of that and move forward, essentially leapfrogging to catch up and put us on a glide path to the targets that we've set as a city. So in particular, looking to adopt the Article 14 of the under our code here, specifically focused on the new energy code, as well as some adjustments to Article 3 to essentially update the 1 and 2 family dwellings to match some of the targets there. So I've presented to this group before, so I won't do the entire presentation, but I'll do a very truncated version of it here, starting with looking at how energy code has changed over time. If you look on the left hand at the top side of the screen, you can see approximately where energy codes were in the 70s, up at that sort of 100%, which is our starting mark, and then the total dropping is the energy efficiency gaining over time as we approach net zero being the bottom of this graph. So we are currently under the 2012 IECC, the energy code, which puts us at a little under 50% better than we were doing in the 70s. That's good news. But looking at when we were looking at the 2018 adoption last year, we were pointing at this and talking about really it made very insignificant changes to the energy code overall. So it was really following this kind of business as usual trajectory, whereas the 2021 energy code really puts us on this glide path down towards the blue star you can see in the bottom right there, which is Kansas City, Missouri's energy target of net zero by 2040. And so the new code is all about ready and resilient. That's the kind of catchphrase they've put with this new version of the code. And I'll just spend a couple of slides on commercial and residential. But before I get there, just in the basic, most high level terms, as an architect, this is how I think about and talk about energy efficiency with building owners, with clients, no matter who they are or what the background is, because we want to start with the cheap stuff first, right? We want to start with the things that are easy, such as making sure the shape and size and orientation of the building are right for where we're building in Kansas City. Next is where we start to think about, okay, so now that I've got the size of the building right, how can I make sure that I'm capturing all of the air I've conditioned so that it's staying where I want it? So thinking about insulation and air tightness as that next stage of effort, next strategy. Once I've done that, now I'm going to think about, okay, so maybe I'll spend a little bit more on my air conditioning system to get a 95% efficient system instead of a 90% efficient system, because look how much less hard it has to work because I've already done these things to reduce the size. So maybe it's even coming out cost neutral, or maybe I'm coming out cost ahead. And then finally, the last step is when we would start talking about renewables, as how can I, now that I've shrunk the overall energy use down as low as it can go, what can I do to offset what's left? Another way to look at this is to think about this sort of business as usual energy use. And then here's those same strategies. We're going to start with orientation to drop it down, insulation, air tightness, and so forth. So the new energy code really focuses on the insulation and air tightness, this sort of second level. Most of the changes are in that band of this. So when we're talking about cost and changes, it's really focused in on that piece of it, while it's also adding some provisions and preparing the way for renewables and efficiency to happen as buildings change over time. So commercial updates, again, I'm going to keep these really high level, and then we can come back for questions as needed. What we're seeing is general energy improvement required, approximately 10% savings. There's a study out now that I think it's more like 9.7, but close enough. Building enclosure changes. So again, focusing on the walls, on the roof, on the windows, making sure they're insulated and airtight as they can be. Lighting improvements, mostly starting to switch over to LEDs and going away from mercury vapor and incandescent lights. flexibility for builders to comply. Starting in the 2018 code, actually in the 2015 code, there's a new section called the Energy Rating Index, which is providing some additional, essentially performance measures for builders to use, rather than just following the prescriptive tables that are in the code that tell them exactly what to do. There is a provision for them to be able to focus either more on envelope or more on building systems, or a combination of the two, to achieve the same end and still be approved. Some of the strengthening amendments that we're recommending are essentially looking back in time at when the IECC 2021 was in draft, and these are some of the pieces that ended up being either watered down or removed. So it's taking essentially the removed language and just putting it right back. So this is about making sure that we're accommodating electric vehicle infrastructure, that we're designing buildings to be solar ready. So, making sure that your roof is ready to accept solar, you're running conduit to an electrical panel, things like that, and electrification ready, which is focused on things like, yeah, that's perfectly fine for you to put in, natural gas heating system, but the requirement would be to also run an electric cable to that same point and make sure that your electric panel is sized to receive an electric piece of that same equipment in the future, so that you don't have to do a much more expensive change out later if you decide to go all electric. And then finally, just to mention that this version of the code also comes with the Zero Code Appendix, which gives prescriptive methods for cities and municipalities to follow a net zero performance path for projects. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So that's on the commercial side. On the residential side, then, again, it's mostly building enclosure updates. It's improved air sealing requirements, again, talking about lighting quality and efficacy. This one also includes some notes about water heating, making sure that your water heater is a little closer to the fixtures. I don't know if everybody here has this issue, but I know growing up in the Brookside area, if you turn the sink on upstairs, you had to wait about a minute and a half to actually get hot water at that point. So it's trying to deal with that kind of wasteful problem. Again, electrification ready, flexibility for contractors, and there's also a zero code specifically pointed at residential as well. What that means for envelope, I just took this comparison, looking at the different versions of code and marked up where the changes occur. So we see an improvement in the ceiling or attic R value, going from an R49 to an R60. That's about another 2 inches of insulation, or about another $160 worth of insulation per 1,000 square feet. Not a huge deal. The wood framed R value, actually, currently we're allowing projects or homes to build with an R13. So it's actually not even up to the 2012 right now. But this allows for not only meeting the current 2012 code, but also other ways to get to that same point. So many builders are very concerned that they'll be required to go to an to a 2x6 construction and the costs that come with that. And the point I'm trying to make here is that because of the 3 different ways they've given you to get there, you do not have to build that way. But there are other things you have to do to make sure that we're getting there. And then overall, we see most of these starting to shift towards what's called continuous insulation, or insulating in a way that's going to keep thermal bridging from happening through studs and through equipment. And then just to talk very briefly about housing in particular, because this is something that we took really seriously in terms of thinking about equity and what's the impact of making these kinds of recommendations. When we look at new housing, and this has got a little dust growing on it now, so we'll have to update this once the market normalizes a little bit here. But looking at 2019, all of the sales in the KC-Mo region, in 2019, there were just under 40,000 homes sold, and 91% of those were existing homes. And the point I want to make here is that the new building code does not apply to everyday home sales. It applies if you're getting into a major, like if you're going to do a gut renovation of one of those homes, then it would apply. But until you get to that point, that it's not what we're talking about here. For new housing, there were only about 3,700 units sold. The average price of those units was close to double the existing home sale price. And even using the most aggressive, like outlandish, this is going to cost us this many more dollars numbers that was still less than 3% of that total, and probably quite a bit less than that. And then finally, just to mention the zero code again, this really is just meant to give cities and municipalities a very predictable, codified way to talk about zero net energy and to potentially tie it to incentives like tax increment financing or other types of incentives through the city. And really just give a prescriptive known method to point people to developers and others to, so that it's an understood and replicable program. That's pretty straightforward. And frankly, this is exactly what the airport is doing when we talk about net zero at the airport. And when Andy was talking earlier about the city buildings purchasing power from the grid from Evergy, that is exactly what's happened. That is exactly this path. Where rather than just including on-site renewables, you're allowed to also do power purchase agreements with your local utility as long as it's in the regional power pool. So I can talk for a long time about this, but I am going to stop there. And Greg or Andy, anything else to add about anything I've covered or where we're at?
I'm going to turn over to Greg and let Greg speak a little bit from his perspective about the steps forward from the city's perspective anyways.
Sure. Thank you, Andy. Jeremy, thanks. Very good summary. I think at this point, the easy part would just be drafting the ordinance to adopt the whole thing, to adopt the whole code. That's kind of the easy part. The question is, would it be adopted? And so there's the fundamental question that if it just moves forward completely unamended, and Jeremy, you were referring to strengthening requirements in the 2021. You were alluding to things included in the 2021 that strengthen over current code, correct? Or are you also considering additional local amendments beyond the 2021? I'm sorry, Jeremy, you're muted.
Yep. I realized it after I started talking. So these are strengthening amendments in the local municipal code to essentially go back to the first the draft version of the 21 before the EV and PV ready language was stripped out.
Gotcha. Okay.
Because it was about this time last year they finalized it and pulled all that out.
Okay. So, I mean, obviously anything can be included as local amendments. Going beyond the model code brings additional considerations, at least in getting those incorporated. So, frankly, I don't know what level of opposition there would exist to the commercial code. I would expect that there will be substantial opposition to the residential changes in total. So I've already reached out to HBA, BOMA, Builder Association, all these groups, encouraging all to, hey, are there specific pain points that you are opposed, or are you just going to come forward opposed to everything in concept? So and I might encourage the same from the proponent side as well, because if you look at some of these studies and if you see that, hey, a certain thing has a payback, and when you're talking more than 100 years for payback, those might be things you might want to consider, whether there's any room for discussion of any of those. But that said, again, the easy thing we can do is create the ordinance to adopt it as it exists. There'll be a little bit of consideration of how you insert just the one chapter of the International Residential Code. And I've got some ideas depending whether you just do that by local amendments or whether you just remove the 2018 chapter and adopt the IECC to apply to commercial residential as well. So we'll need to give some thought about the best approach. And frankly, that'll probably end up depending on where the number of amendments that are in discussion. If everyone recalls, or I don't know if everyone's familiar, when we'd put forward the 2018 package, we had removed many of the local amendments, almost all of them from the commercial before the decision was made to wait and consider the 2021. So that's where we are in consideration of readiness. I think you could probably divide that conversation to is readiness mean the full installation or just to provide the ease of conversion later on? For example, do you just install conduits that provide for a route for future wiring versus actually doing the wiring now when it might not be needed? Because versus getting the conduits in so you don't have to disturb any finished construction versus actually doing
Quite a
the
bit
wiring.
cheaper.
So
Yeah, right.
that might be something in that readiness conversation to show how much added expenses at the beginning, which that's where all the discussion will go, is current cost versus payback versus all the greater benefits of all of this.
Right.
But we know where the other side will come from. And then, Jeremy, the only one technical point, I was thinking that the 2021 had gone to R20 plus 5 continuous for the wall insulation, which is effectively an R30 wall, which really jumps out as the impact. So because R20, I think you have your choice of how you can get there. R30.
I'll double check that. This was a table off of the one of the energy websites, so
Sure.
I'll double check the date on it.
Right. So yes, the question of can you do it with 2x6s by using foam, or are you also adding additional exterior insulation? And in Kansas City market, homes are typically built with what's called single wall construction, where you don't have a layer of plywood covered by siding, which makes it easier to add foam board insulation on the outside without becoming a structural consideration. So we kind of have a unique market in how homes are built unless you're using a stucco or a brick product or some other separate veneer on the outside, which makes it much easier just to add foam board insulation on the outside. So all considerations, but again, we can if the desire of council was to adopt it as is, we could have that ordinance ready tomorrow. The question would be, will there be a dialogue on, are we adopting it in total? Are we adopting extra provisions? Or is there any particular areas that might be open for negotiation to achieve the adoption of the document?
I'm going to hop in. Thank you all so much for those presentations and update. And given that we just have a couple minutes left, I wanted to, I guess, go ahead and move that our committee make a recommendation for the city council to adopt the 2021 IECC code with the strengthening amendments that Jeremy outlined. So do we have a second for that?
This is Michael Kelly. I'll second.
Okay. Is there any discussion around that? Okay. Last call for any discussion?
I was
All
just
right.
looking to see, this is Kristen, can you hear me?
Yes.
I was just looking to see if any conservative states have a building code. And apparently most of them don't. Because I didn't realize Missouri I didn't realize that Missouri never adopted a building code. That's pretty wild. But I mean, it's clearly by blue and red states whether they have building codes or not, which is pretty interesting.
But luckily, we do have home rule.
That is true.
Any further discussion? All right, hearing none, let's go ahead and vote on making a recommendation to City Council that they adopt the 2021 IECC code with strengthening amendments. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. All right, the ayes have it. We'll put together that letter and recommendation. Thank you all so much. We're just about at time, but are there any other announcements or anything anyone would like to make before we adjourn for today? Andy?
Yeah, just real quick. I back probably a few weeks ago, I had asked for comments to a climate resolution for a climate emergency. I asked for input from the steering committee as well as the Environmental Management Commission. This was a request from Councilwoman Robinson that wanted to kind of put together a resolution declaring the climate emergency, as well as some additional points on credit programs or subsidy programs that would support that climate action. And we hadn't heard anything for since we submitted the draft. However, Councilwoman Robinson has reached out to me to ask our stakeholders to be prepared to offer testimony. The resolution is going to be introduced on Thursday, and then from there it'll probably show up in committee the following week, which will be next week. Not sure yet which committee it's going to go to. That'll be decided on Thursday. More than likely, it'll be TIO or finance. So I'm just asking this particular committee to kind of keep your eyes open for it. I will also send out an email blast also once I know what the resolution number is and the actual text of the resolution. I'd ask this committee to participate next week in the committee meetings to offer testimony. And I'll provide an email address as well, where you can actually send your email testimony as well if you don't want to do that virtually or come to council chambers to do that. And then just also, I noticed MOSUP sent out an email earlier, just I don't know, maybe an hour ago. They're having their second meeting here in Kansas City on December 7th. That's all I have.
Thanks, Andy. Anything else? All right, hearing none, I move we adjourn for today. I don't know if I need to move to adjourn, but I'll move to adjourn. Give a second. All right.
Let's adjourn.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice evening. And our next meeting will be November 15th, right, Andy? That's what the agenda says, so.
Yep.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye.